I never imagined that love could be such a masterful lie. Hello guys, welcome to Petals of Revenge. If you're enjoying this story of justice served cold, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your support means everything. At 27, I thought I understood the world, thought I could read people like the financial reports that crossed my desk daily. But Ethan Cole taught me that even the smartest women can be played by a man who's perfected the art of deception. My name is Betty to everyone at the medical clinic where I work as an admin, earning barely enough to cover rent in my modest apartment. They see me clipping coupons, bringing homemade lunches, wearing the same 3 blazers on rotation. What they don't see is the trust fund, worth 8 figures sitting untouched in my accounts, or the fact that my father owns half of Manhattan's premier real estate. I chose this life deliberately. After watching too many relationships crumble under the weight of my family's wealth, I decided to find love without the contamination of money. I wanted someone who would choose me for who I am, not what I could buy them. That's when I met Ethan at a coffee shop near the university. He was hunched over medical textbooks, dark circles under his eyes, wearing a wrinkled shirt that had seen better days. When he dropped his wallet and quarters scattered across the floor, I helped him collect them. He was embarrassed, apologetic, genuine in a way that made my heart skip. Med school's killing my budget. He laughed nervously, stuffing the change back into his worn leather wallet. But it'll be worth it when I'm saving lives. I fell for that version of him completely. The struggling student with noble dreams, working night shifts at a diner to pay for his education. He talked about wanting to specialize in pediatric surgery, about giving underprivileged kids the same medical care as wealthy ones. His passion was intoxicating. We started dating slowly. Coffee dates where he insisted on paying despite clearly counting every dollar. Movie nights at his tiny studio apartment where we'd share a single bag of popcorn. He was thoughtful in small ways that money couldn't buy. Remembering how I liked my tea, always walking on the street side of the sidewalk. After 6 months, he was struggling, really struggling. His part-time job wasn't covering tuition, and he was talking about dropping out, maybe taking a year off to save money. I couldn't watch his dreams die. Not when I had the power to save them. That's when I started helping, subtly at first. I'd find 20s in my coat pocket and give them to him for groceries. I'd win fake contests that didn't exist, giving him the prize money. When his laptop died during finals week, I convinced him I'd gotten a huge employee bonus and could afford to buy him a replacement. The bigger expenses required more elaborate lies. When his tuition was due, and he was $3,000 short, I told him my grandmother had left me an inheritance. When his rent increased, I claimed a wealthy patient at the clinic had given me a tip for helping with her insurance paperwork. Every month, I'd craft new stories to explain how someone living paycheck to paycheck could suddenly afford to help her boyfriend. Ethan was grateful, almost tearfully so. He'd hold me tight and promise to pay me back once he was established in his career. He'd talk about our future, about the house we'd buy together, the children we'd raise. I felt like his guardian angel, secretly ensuring his success while he believed he was earning it through his own merit. The engagement came during his 3rd year. Nothing fancy, just him on one knee in his apartment with a simple ring he'd saved for months to buy. I said yes immediately, my heart full of love for this man who was working so hard for our future. But love, I learned, can blind you too. Patterns you should have noticed. The first red flag appeared 6 months after our engagement. Ethan came home wearing a Rolex Submariner, the kind that retails for $8,000. When I asked about it, he claimed he'd found it at a pawn shop for $300. Can you believe someone would sell this for so little, he said, admiring it on his wrist. Probably stolen, but hey, their loss is my gain. I wanted to believe him. Pawn shops sometimes had incredible deals, and Ethan was smart enough to spot a bargain. But something about his explanation felt rehearsed, like he'd practiced it in the mirror. The designer sneakers came next, limited edition Jordans, that I knew cost over $500 retail. Again, Ethan had a story ready. A fellow student was desperate for cash and sold them cheap. Then it was a leather jacket, a new watch, expensive cologne. Each item came with an explanation that technically made sense but felt increasingly hollow. I started paying attention to his habits. Ethan claimed to be studying constantly, but I rarely saw his textbooks at home. He'd leave for study groups that lasted until midnight. But when I called him to bring dinner, his phone would go straight to voicemail. He'd come home smelling like expensive restaurants, explaining he'd grabbed a quick burger while reviewing notes with classmates. The changes in him were subtle but undeniable. The man who used to feel guilty about accepting my help now seemed to expect it. When his car broke down, he didn't ask if I could help with repairs. He assumed I would cover them entirely. When his rent was due, he'd mention it casually, knowing I'd handle it without discussion. "You're so good to me, Betty," he'd say, kissing my forehead. "I'm the luckiest guy in the world." But his eyes had changed. Where once they'd held genuine warmth and gratitude, now there was something calculating, almost predatory. He'd size up expensive items in stores. Check his reflection more often. Talk about his future success with an arrogance that made me uncomfortable. I told myself I was being paranoid. Medical school was stressful, and maybe Ethan was just growing more confident as graduation approached. The man I'd fallen in love with was still there, I reasoned, just buried under the pressure of his studies and dreams. The real wake-up call came on a Thursday night in February. Ethan claimed to have a major exam the next day and needed to stay at the library until it closed. I decided to surprise him with his favorite, coffee and snacks, thinking I'd be the supportive. The university library was nearly empty when I arrived at 9 p.m. I searched every floor, every study room, every corner where Ethan might be hunched over his books. He wasn't there. The security guard confirmed that no one matching his description had been an all-day. My hands were shaking as I drove to his apartment, coffee growing cold in the cup holder. Maybe he'd felt sick and come home early. I told myself, maybe he was studying there instead. But the parking spot where his car should have been was empty and his windows were dark. I sat in my car for 2 hours, calling his phone repeatedly. Each call went straight to voicemail. That cheerful message I'd helped him record. "Hey, you've reached Ethan. I'm probably saving lives or studying how to save them. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." He finally came home at midnight. I was waiting in the hallway outside his door. He looked genuinely startled to see me, and for a moment his mask slipped completely. This wasn't the face of a man who'd been studying. This was the face of someone who'd been caught. "Betty, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice higher than usual. "I brought you coffee," I said quietly, holding up the long cold cup. "I thought you might need it for studying." I watched him think, calculating his response. The pause was too long, too deliberate. "Oh, you're so sweet," he finally said, reaching for his keys. "I ended up at Marcus' place instead. His apartment is quieter. You know how thin these walls are." Marcus, his study group partner. I'd met him twice. A serious guy who lived across town with his girlfriend. It was a plausible story. But Ethan's body language was all wrong. He couldn't meet my eyes, kept fidgeting with his keys, seemed eager to get inside and away from my questions. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I hired a private investigator. I know it sounds extreme, but 3 years and $45,000 of my money had bought me the right to know the truth. If Ethan was cheating, I needed proof before confronting him. If he wasn't, I'd apologize for doubting him and try to work through my trust issues. The investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Carol Martinez, took the case without judgment. She'd seen enough cheating spouses to know the signs, and when I described Ethan's behavior, she nodded knowingly. "Give me 2 weeks," she said. "If he's hiding something, I'll find it." Those 2 weeks were torture. I continued my normal routine, going to work, having dinner with Ethan, pretending everything was fine, but I analyzed every word he spoke, every expression on his face, every excuse for his absences. The man I thought I knew was becoming a stranger. Carol called on a Tuesday morning, with news that shattered my world. "You need to see this in person," she said. "Can you meet me this afternoon?" Her office was small and cluttered. The walls, covered with certificates and photos from successful cases. She spread a series of photographs across her desk like a dealer laying out a royal flush. The first photo showed Ethan entering an upscale apartment building downtown, the kind of place where rent started at $4,000 a month. He was carrying flowers and a bottle of what looked like expensive wine. "This is the Meridian Tower," Carol explained. "Luxury condos. Your fiancé has been visiting apartment 2,847 3 times a week for the past month." The next photo showed him with a woman. She was beautiful, blonde, wearing designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly salary. They were laughing together on a restaurant patio, his hand covering hers across the table. Her name is Victoria Sterling, 25, works in marketing for a high-end cosmetics company. According to my sources, she believes Ethan comes from a wealthy family and is supporting him through medical school. Carol continued flipping through the photos. Ethan and Victoria at expensive restaurants. Ethan buying her jewelry at Tiffany & Co. Ethan kissing her in the parking garage of her building. Each image was like a knife twisting in my chest. "There's more," Carol said quietly. "He's been using your financial support to fund this entire relationship. The apartment he visits belongs to her, but he's been paying half the rent. The gifts, the dinners, the trips they've taken together, it's all being financed with money you gave him for his education and living expenses." I stared at the photos, my vision blurring. With tears I refused to let fall. 3 years of my life. 3 years of believing in us, in him and the future. We were building together. All of it built on lies.com. "How long?" I whispered. "The relationship with Victoria has been going on for 8 months. That there were others before her. I found evidence of at least 3 different women over the past 2 years, all of them believing he was wealthy. All of them receiving gifts purchased with your money." The room felt like it was spinning. I gripped the edge of Carol's desk, trying to process the magnitude of Ethan's betrayal. This wasn't just cheating. This was systematic fraud. He had turned my love into a business model, using my generosity to fund multiple relationships, while I lived modestly, sacrificing my own comfort for his supposed dreams. "There's one more thing," Carol said, hesitating. I was able to access some of his financial records. "He's been documenting everything." She handed me a flash drive. "He keeps detailed spreadsheets of his expenses and income sources. You're listed as primary asset in his files. The other women are categorized as secondary assets and tertiary assets based on how much money he's extracted from them." I took the flash drive with numb fingers. Primary asset. That's what 3 years of love had made. Me in his eyes, not his girlfriend, not his fiancée, not the woman who believed in his dreams when no one else would. An asset to be managed and exploited. That night, I went home and plugged in the flash drive with shaking hands. What I found was worse than anything Carol had described. Ethan's files were meticulous, organized like a business portfolio. He had created profiles for each woman, nodding their income levels, their emotional vulnerabilities, their spending limits. My profile was the most detailed. He had tracked every dollar I'd given him, every story I believed, every weakness he could exploit. Under emotional triggers, he'd written, "Save your complex, wants to feel needed, responds well to gratitude, and future promises. Maximum extraction potential, unlimited." There were photos of gifts he'd bought with my money, receipts for expensive dinners I'd never attended, hotel bookings for romantic weekends I'd never been invited to. He had been living a completely separate life, funded entirely by my generosity and trust. The other women's profiles were equally devastating. Sarah, a nurse who thought she was helping him through financial hardship, had given him over $12,000. Jennifer, a teacher who believed they were saving for their future together, had contributed $8,000. Each woman had a story, a reason for helping, a dream of a future with a man who saw them as nothing more than income streams. I sat in my apartment until dawn, reading through every file, every receipt, every cold calculation of how to extract maximum value from women who loved him. By morning, I wasn't just heartbroken, I was furious. This wasn't a man who had made mistakes or gotten in over his head. This was a predator who had turned emotional manipulation into an art form, but I wasn't ready to confront him yet. If Ethan could play a long game, so could I. I had advantages he didn't know about, resources he couldn't imagine. If he wanted to treat love like a business transaction, I would show him what real power looked like. I continued my routine, but everything had changed. When Ethan kissed me good morning, I felt nothing but disgust. When he talked about our wedding plans, I wanted to scream. When he asked for money to cover his graduation expenses, I gave it to him with a smile and started planning his destruction. The graduation party was going to be his moment of triumph. 4 years of medical school, a residency lined up at St. Michael's Medical Center, a future filled with respect and success. All of it built on the sacrifice of women he'd manipulated and betrayed. I decided that would be the perfect setting for his downfall. The party was held at an upscale hotel, with his professors, classmates, family, and friends in attendance. I had helped plan it, of course, another contribution to his success. I wore my best dress, did my hair perfectly, and arrived ready to play my part. One last time, Ethan was in his element, working the room like the politician he'd probably become someday. He introduced me to his professors as his girlfriend, to his classmates as his support system, to his family as the woman who believed in him when times were tough. Each introduction felt like sandpaper against my soul. But the moment I'd been dreading and anticipating arrived when his mother stood up to give a toast. Dr. Patricia Cole was an elegant woman, a successful physician herself, and she beamed with pride as she looked at her son. "I want to thank everyone who made this moment possible," she began, raising her champagne flute, "especially the special woman in Ethan's life." I straightened, expecting to be acknowledged as his fiancée, as the woman who'd supported his dreams through the difficult years. "Victoria Sterling," Dr. Cole continued, "thank you for being such a wonderful influence on my son. Your love and support have made all the difference." The room erupted in applause as Victoria stepped forward, radiant in a designer gown that probably cost more than my car. She kissed Ethan softly, and he wrapped his arms around her like she was his whole world. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The room was spinning, conversations blurring into white noise. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not in front of everyone. Not after everything I'd sacrificed. But it got worse. When someone asked about me, Ethan didn't miss a beat. "Oh, that's Betty," he said casually, not even looking in my direction. "She's been my roommate for the past few years. Great girl, really reliable. She helped me stay organized through school." Roommate. After 3 years of love, of sacrifice, of believing in our future together, I had been reduced to a reliable roommate. The engagement ring on my finger suddenly felt like a joke, a prop in a play. where I was the only one who didn't know the script. I tried to speak up, tried to correct him, but my voice came out as barely a whisper in the noisy room. No one heard me. No one noticed the woman standing in the corner with tears streaming down her face. That's when Ethan noticed my distress, but instead of showing concern or guilt, he looked annoyed. He walked over quickly, his smile never wavering for the benefit of his audience. "Betty, you're making a scene," he hissed quietly. "This isn't the time or place for whatever drama you're cooking up." "Drama?" I managed to whisper. "Ethan, we're engaged. These people think Victoria is your girlfriend." He glanced around quickly, making sure no one was listening. "Look, things changed. Victoria and I are together now. I thought you understood that. We can talk about this later. But right now you need to pull yourself together or leave." The casual cruelty of his words hit me like a physical blow. 3 years of love dismissed like a cancelled appointment. $45,000 of my money treated like a business transaction that had run its course. My entire future erased with the wave of his hand. When I tried to speak again, tried to tell someone, anyone, the truth about our relationship and what I'd sacrificed for him, Ethan made a subtle gesture to 2 security guards who were working the event. "I think my former roommate has had too much to drink," he told them with fake concern. "Could you help her get some air?" I found myself being escorted out of the hotel, past the colleagues who thought I was just some drunk woman causing trouble, past his family who didn't even know who I was, past Victoria who watched with mild curiosity as the disruption was removed from her perfect evening. The last thing I saw before the elevator doors closed was Ethan back at Victoria's side, accepting congratulations and talking about their bright future together. He had already forgotten I existed. I stood in the hotel parking lot in my carefully chosen dress, my makeup ruined by tears, my heart shattered into pieces too small to ever reassemble. The man I'd loved, the man I'd sacrificed everything for, had just erased me from his life story as easily as deleting a file from his computer. That was the moment Betty, the naive girlfriend, died and something much more dangerous was born. I had been his victim, his mark, his primary asset, but I was also something he'd never bothered to discover. I was the daughter of one of the most powerful men in New York, with resources and connections that could destroy him completely. Ethan Cole had made the mistake of his life, and he had no idea what was coming for him. The rain started as I drove home, washing the makeup from my face and somehow cleansing me of the woman I'd been for the past 3 years. By the time I reached my apartment, I wasn't crying anymore. I was planning. He wanted to play games with people's hearts and futures. Fine. I would show him what it felt like when someone with real power decided to play back. The graduation party had been his moment of triumph, but it would also be the last happy day of his life. I opened my laptop and started making calls. It was time for Ethan Cole to meet the real me and discover that some assets are too dangerous to liquidate. The war was about to begin, and Ethan Cole had just supplied me with the nuclear weapon that would end it.